So in this section, we'll go over a little bit about how we can use lean and just-in-time as a competitive advantage. Oh, click over. So this is lean and just-in-time are really powerful strategies for improving operations. So materials arrive when they are needed and only when they are needed. And because of this, you're saving money on inventory. And the whole thing, we keep driving about inventory, but inventory is really important. And I can give you a couple of examples why. We got this picture here of this guy in a kitchen. Well, if you have a big inventory of food and it doesn't get used, food spoils. It's not something you can keep indefinitely. So this is a big advantage, especially when you're dealing with perishable goods, that you're only getting them when you need them and you're not holding on to a lot of them. But even in a manufactured environment, the problem with holding a lot of inventory is sometimes the stuff goes out of date, especially if you're dealing with anything that's on the leading edge of technology, especially electronics. And what'll happen is if you have a large inventory of a certain circuit board or a certain device, and then all of a sudden they stop making it, or, oh, the specs have changed and now you need to use this new device as opposed to the old one, or even if you change the function of your own device, which calls for different parts, then what happens is you're stuck with all this inventory. And I mean, a lot of times it's not like the supplier is going to take it back. So that's another big thing about just having this lower inventory, and that's one of the things as an engineer I think about a lot, because that's one of the things that I worry about when you carry this inventory. Are you going to be able to use it? Now, some things are a little different than others. If you have a bunch of, at least on the use side, if you have a bunch of screws, well, screws don't change. So, okay, well, maybe if we're holding inventory screws, we're still paying money to have them there. They're still taking up space. But, you know, you're not going to end up scrapping those. But circuit boards, lenses, displays, all this kind of stuff constantly gets updated. And if you have a whole bunch of it on hand, it ends up going to waste. Also, lean just-in-time is really about identifying problems and driving out the wastes. And waste reduce costs, reduces variability, and improves throughput. All things that affect the bottom line. Now, one important thing with lean, especially with the just-in-time, is you have to have a really meaningful buyer-supplier relationship, because you are going to be relying on this third party to get you what you need for the company when you need it. So if you have an unreliable supplier that's like, oh, we can't get this stuff to you now, that's going to mess up your supply chain. So and this is where the operations management people come into play, is not only making sure that you have really good relationships with that person that's supplying the product, but you've got another couple backups to go to in case something happens. And once again, during the 2020 COVID pandemic stuff, you see that pop up with some companies, that some companies can't supply products for quite some time because their suppliers could not get them the raw materials for it. I do some model work and miniature painting and stuff, and there's just some of the paints that I usually get from Spain. For me right now, I'm waiting 3 and 4 months to get, because they lost connection to some of their suppliers and they didn't have a real backup for it. So I mean, even on stupid stuff like that, you can see this really comes into play. So if you take a look at some of these just-in-time techniques that we've got on the suppliers, you have a few vendors, and the reason you have few vendors is you're sitting there and you've got these relationships worked out to where you're getting the stuff right from them. You have a timetable set in, and so they're able to deliver it when you need it. So you have to be very supportive of those relationships. The quantities have to be delivered on time and directly to work areas. So if you work at a big factory, when you have, say, the steel gets delivered, it doesn't get delivered to the other side of the factory. It comes in right to where it's needed. And so other just-in-time techniques is layouts are in work cells, working in groups. You have flexible machinery so you can move things around. The workplace is organized and reduce space for inventory because you're not holding all of this in. Inventories are going to be those small lot sizes, low setup times, specialized part bins, so things aren't all getting mixed together. They're all separated out. You know, you're very scheduled way of doing things. Maintenance is scheduled. You have quality production, so you've got statistical process controls. Once again, this is where a lot of that Six Sigma stuff comes in. Your suppliers are all vetted and they're all quality suppliers. You have that employee empowerment. And one of those things they bring up, especially for just in time, is you have cross-trained employees. And you're probably sitting there going, well, why is that important to the just-in-time technique? Well, if you have a critical employee that's out, you've got somebody from another area that can step in and fill that vacancy. And so, especially for this kind of stuff, your companies usually have increased training support because they are training more people and they want everybody to be the best workforce they can. Now, this comes into sort of a problem on the human resources end of things, because if you apply a lot of training support to somebody, you've made them more valuable. And so this is on the HR side. They have to make sure that the salaries and the compensations are competitive so they don't lose that brain drain. You will see that a lot in corporations, is they don't want to train people too much because they don't want them to be too good and leave for another place. So that's a culture thing that goes on with the company. But also for just in time, you have fewer job classifications. So you're really minimizing the number of jobs that you have. So that way the employees are more flexible. And so this really takes that commitment of management, employees, and suppliers. So you need all three of those aspects together to really have this just-in-time techniques work. Now, that's a lot of time and money and effort to start and to continue, as you can see, but what are the benefits and why is that an advantage? Well, if you look at the bottom of that chart, we get rapid throughput assets, the quality improvement reduces waste, you get cost reduction, because once you get this all in place, there is some upfront time and money put into it, but once it's in place, your manufacturing costs end up getting reduced. And if you have reduced costs, then you have more pricing flexibility. So now if you need to start playing around with that with your competitors who are not doing that, you can start kind of undercutting them. Variability reduction. Hopefully that we've leveled everything out. Rework reduction, so if we're doing things right the first time, we don't have to go back and do it. So what does it do? Well, you get a faster response to the customer at a lower cost and a higher quality. So it gives your company a real competitive advantage. Because, who doesn't want faster products at lower cost and a higher quality than what the competitor can give you? And so one thing to look at is how do suppliers get concerned when they're dealing with that? Well, they look at diversification, because if you're only tied to one customer, it increases risks. I can think of, so when I was leaving college and during the first economic downturn, there was a company called Delphi in Rochester, New York, and they were a supplier of parts to GE. I'm sorry, not GE, GM. And that's all they did, is supplied parts to GM. When the economy took a downturn and GM just basically stopped making stuff for a while, Delphi got wiped out. They had nobody else to sell to, and they went out of business. Scheduling. Suppliers are concerned with that because they don't believe customers can create a smooth, their customers, being the companies, are going to be able to create a smooth schedule if they're doing that all the time. They're worried about lead time, because short lead times, which is what just-in-time really brings out, means that engineering or spec changes can cause problems because it takes time to do those. Quality limited by capital budgets, processes, or technology. And lot sizes. Small lot sizes may transfer more costs to the suppliers. But these are things that, as you're building those relationships, these are the kind of things that suppliers are really going to be concerned with if you're running a just-in-time kind of organization. And so this is the kind of thing that you keep in mind as you're working with them to help alleviate those concerns with the way that your company is going to be running.